and I'm here. Started a moment early. Uh-oh, the music. Don't need to repeat. So, first off, I apologize in the background if you hear lawn mowing. Of course, Murphy's Law. The lawn starts mowing as soon as I turn on the audio for this. Great. So if you don't know, I'm Nolan T. Jones. I am one of the co-founders of Roll20. It started April in 2012 with Richard Zayas, Riley Dutton, and myself. And I'm currently the managing partner of Roll20, so I'm the person doing the day-to-day shot calling for what we've got going on and what's coming up. Today you've got a really, really lo-fi stream out of me. What we'll be doing is we'll be talking about fog and function. As you can see, which direction am I mirrored? That way? Nope, that way. Fog and function, which is our upcoming, and when I say upcoming, I mean super duper soon. It'll be coming out this week. As for exactly when the code push is live, we haven't said that out loud yet, but it could be super duper soon. So, you know, be ready. We'll talk a little bit about the next update. There's a lot there I cannot share yet, but I will give you some previews conceptually so you've got an idea of what we're touching, so you know kind of an idea of what we're hoping to get done end of this year, beginning of next year. And then we're going to take questions, and then we're going to take some more questions. So we're going to do a lot of what you guys want to talk about today. So I guess to hop right into it, let's look at fog and function real quick. So here we are, Roll20 Virtual Tabletop. There are essentially 5 parts of this upcoming update. One is Advanced Fog of War, which utilizes our Fog of War and dynamic lighting to allow you to reveal things similar to old school real-time strategy games. So an example, StarCraft, Warcraft, things like that. There's also an update to our 5e open gaming license sheet. With that, I'll go into a little bit and show off a little bit here. And additionally, we have a Dungeon World Compendium and Dungeon World sheet, making things 3 and 4. And then also Gumshoe. Several of its systems from Pilgrim Press are going to be getting an updated sheet. Man, that lawn mowing in the background. I hope it's not as bad for you all as it is here. Hopefully my mic is picking me up instead of it. So, first off, I'm going to show off what the fog element works like. This thing is really pretty darn cool. What I've got here, and by the way, all of what I use today is on the Roll20 marketplace, and I swear I bookmarked this for myself and I've lost it. I think it's Zekios who did it. It's a pixel setup. It does sound like I have a fan in my room. That's okay. That's a bummer. But I used all his pixel artwork today. It's really, really great. I like it a lot. What I've done here is I've made just a very simple little map with fog and everything set up and dynamic lighting set up. And then for those of you who don't know, if you press Control and L at the same time, it'll allow you as a game master to kind of see your setup as far as dynamic lighting goes. So when I take this little dude and I move him around, you'll notice that it permanently reveals the areas that I've gone to. Again, that real-time strategy setup. And there's different things you could do setting-wise for how much you want it to reveal or how you want it to set up. So you can have options in terms of how feathered it looks or how together and squared it looks. Really, Command L on Mac, thank you for pointing that out. But it's honestly a really simple system, and the thing that I'm most excited about, well, everyone is most excited about, is that it allows you to put folks there that you would reveal on your token layer, and then you leave, and you don't know if they're still there. So that's, you know, obviously there's a whole bunch of functionality related to that and dungeon crawling in that real-time strategy area that's going to be really, really useful. This has been one of the top requested features on Roll20 for years. And honestly, the thing that held us up is that we couldn't quite figure out the math. We figured out the math, and so we've got a version of it that is live right now on, if you're a pro user, that you can use on the development server. That's where I'm at currently to show this off. And yeah, it's really, really cool. It's been something that's been requested for a long time, and I think it's going to get a whole lot of use from people. So that's exciting. The other thing that I wanted to briefly show off while I'm in the interface and touch on before I run to questions is talking a little bit about what we've done with the character sheet for 5th edition. So the 5th edition character sheet, just kind of the broad strokes from the open gaming license setup that we've got. The sheet as it currently stands on live has 1,200 attributes, and we've narrowed it down here to 900 attributes. So about a 25% data cut without a functionality loss, but instead an increase in usability. Steve Kuntz, lead developer, is the one who led this charge, and man oh man did he nail it. There's a lot of really cool stuff to this. Giant's belt is, I think, what I was gonna show off today. Belt of giant strength. So one of the things, if you use the current setup with our compendiums and with the character sheet, that you'll find is that you had to previously specifically say where you were putting things into the interface. Belt of giant. There we go. You had to specifically say, you know, if I'm putting in an item, I've got to put it in the right slot for it to populate into. Yeah, who is mowing the lawn? Isn't that a pain? It really is. I'm sorry about that. But the belt of giant strength or any other item, you would have to go put specifically where it needed to go. Now you just drag, drop, it auto-populates to where it needs to go. And if you'll see here, it's actually adding the strength attribute automatically in a way that you can see what's going on. That in and of itself makes the world a much better place, and something that we're really excited about in terms of just a simple functionality that's going to make everyone's lives a lot easier. All of that relates similarly for spells. They are able to move in proper cantrips or any other spell. Drop in, and it knew that I was putting in a 3rd level spell, automatically hopped it in, and we go from there. That's a huge increase in what we're able to do from a very speedy standpoint to get you up and running in your games. Yeah, it's really nice. It's really simple. It's one of those things that it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it certainly has a whole lot of use for a whole lot of people who are using that 5th edition open gaming license sheet. The other thing that I wanted to point out to people that's different in terms of what's going live in the Fog and Function update with this sheet is that all the things that you would do, like global modifiers on attacks or anything like that, are now easily accessible in the settings tab. So you can do proficiency dies, you can do all sorts of additions like that in a way that will continuously be tracked and be useful. So I think that this ends up being a really good, somebody in chat's putting it, is a quality of life feature. Which is exciting. You know, that's the sort of thing that we would like to do. Beyond that, we'll have, like I said, updates for Dungeon World and an internal sheet that we've made, and Gumshoe. The Dungeon World will also come with the Compendium, so we've taken the information for that and put it into our Compendium, so we'll have a 3rd Compendium live, and you'll be able to use that functionality if you're playing. I think it's worth teasing that we will have, hopefully in about 2 weeks, we're going to have the guys who play for Roll20 Esports are going to be doing a special stream where they're going to be doing Dungeon World inside the interface, and they'll be showing off that Compendium as well as just playing for the first time. So if you want to see some noobs run around, it should be a really, really good time. But yeah, that's kind of the update in a nutshell. Fog and functionality. So we're excited to have something big out there. This is the first major feature push we've done since March, which feels like an incredibly long time for us, but we spent most of our summer getting some new folks acquainted with the ins and outs of the program to help do some more coding down the line. So we think that those efforts were well spent. We'll see how much we can get done down the road. And so to down the road and related to 5th edition, in case you missed it, we announced earlier this month that we are not immediately releasing day and date with Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which is the next Dungeons and Dragons adventure that's coming out. Or I guess it's not an adventure, it's more of a rule book. And similar to us not having released the Player's Handbook yet, we don't feel like we've got a cool way to utilize that information, something that really sings and gives you a reason to use it in Roll20. And so we're holding off because we are specifically doing some things that we think will better showcase that. As for exactly when that will be done, obviously there's several stakeholders in that, so it's going to be a little while before we can reveal everything to you, but hang on. And then the other thing that we've said publicly that we're definitely working on, we've had a huge upswing in folks joining on our marketplace in the past year, with even more unannounced, really cool licenses on the way. And because of that, we're taking a moment to change our marketplace interface so it's a little bit easier to navigate and see individual artists' work, see what they're doing and purchase. We're hoping to also get wish lists as a part of that because we know that that's something that folks are interested in. So those are two things that we are out there saying are coming sometime in the next quarter or so, hopefully end of 2017, beginning of 2018. But we've already started in on some work with that as we finish up Fog and Function. So yeah, that is what we've got. So other than that, my plan for the rest of today is to talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. So I'm just going to hop in to questions here. First off, I would like to thank from the Pro Forums, Lady Victoria, I believe, was the person who kicked off the inquiry as to when we would next be doing one of these. So thank you for making that inquiry because we did let it go too long as far as doing one of these, and we want to get into more of a habit with that. We're hoping to have a new community manager on here within the next month or so. So hopefully we'll have some methodology of implementing more of these as we go. So to get started, I'm going to go straight from chat. There's a statement. No, it's a question. How about making voice and video more consistently usable? And that's a super valid thing to inquire about. So for those who aren't aware, beginning of this year, we switched to do voice and video internally. So we took WebRTC, which is the ability to use voice and video over internet provider in browsers. And we decided that we wanted to run that ourselves with the hope of being able to do some functions that folks have been asking for years. So an example of something that we've been trying to do there would be whispering between players or GM, so that you could pull to the side and have conversations with other people in your party. When we did it, there are issues with folks who essentially they fail out quietly with the way that the server talk happens. So in other words, somebody has trouble getting the bandwidth to talk to other people. And when the system is unaware of their inability to connect, we don't have a way to say it didn't connect, and so it cascades, screws up for everybody being in the voice and video. We're aware of it. We're looking into solutions for it. There's a few out there, and we're talking to people right now. We're talking to various outside contractors and stuff like that to see about getting us a fix. I think one of the things that's been tough from our standpoint with this is that we know people use this, but at the same time, we're one of a very few people out there even attempting to do this sort of voice and video with everything else that we have as a suite of tools. So It's been a process. Not one that we're really pleased with how it's gone in terms of we've estimated what the numbers are of folks who are affected by this, and it's not. The reality is it doesn't matter how many people are affected by this. If one person is affected by this, it kind of makes our entire voice and video completely unusable for them. So in the meantime, our hope is that you do use some of the dedicated voice and video items out there if you've got to. If you got to use Skype, if you got to use Discord and things like that, that's nothing we take offense to. And it's been a bummer for us as well that Google Hangouts ended their integration this year. So there's not a methodology for us to integrate with them anymore, to use them as a possible backup. So this is something that it is a priority to us. We just recognize that it can't be the only priority with the programming hours we've got, because there are other methods out there to use. So we're working on it. I'm hopeful that we're going to see some movement on it soon, TM, but that's one of those things that I don't know how quickly it's coming. But it's definitely not something that we are unaware of. So, moving on. Hey, Tanya, I've never pronounced it right. Fighter. I realize that you and I are on after this. Not on, but on. Moving into other questions. Do we intend to have the option for making custom spells items to the compendium so you wouldn't have to make them manually? Okay, so that's a really good question. Custom compendiums are something we absolutely want to do. I think the challenge for us right now is figuring out a way to do them that's not piracy promotion. And so the example would be, you change the first letter of every spell in a player's handbook and then put it out there and allow people to play with that. So it's definitely something that we're super interested in doing. It makes a lot of sense for us. It's a lot of fun, and it's something that that we're hoping to get out there into the future soon. But there are some licensing hurdles there. And that's one of those things I think that has been overall really, really good to us, is as we have erred on the side of being really clean with licensing, I think that we've been rewarded by folks being willing to license with us. And like I said, there are more unannounced licenses coming in the next few months. So I think that's something that we'll continue to err on the side of caution in terms of making certain that as we do stuff like this, that it's enabled in such a way to get the maximum use for you without a whole bunch of digital rights management stuff, but at the same time done in such a way that it doesn't easily enable folks pirating. What happened to the Roll20 Associate program where we were hosting other streams when they were playing RPGs using Roll20? Just something that we haven't caught up on. I'll say overall, so right now there are a lot of really good Roll20 streams out there. As a matter of fact, like the Dungeons and Dragons channel has both, what Adam's doing with the Tomb of Annihilation right now, what Neil Erickson and Trump SC are doing, a new show that's on Roll20, and then just loads and loads of other great shows that are out there. I was just looking at one that was essentially an anime fandom cast the other day that was really, really good. And we need to do a better job of using our channel to host those things. I think one of the ways that we're going to do that is, after we've onboarded a new community manager. But I'll say, really honestly, my hope is to get some more content production people on Roll20 staff and to do more of that down the line. I think one of the challenges that I've seen in terms of trying to figure that out is that our standards are really crazy high. When you're starting with Adam Coble as your starting point for streaming, you've got somebody who really understands Twitch as a platform and can really, really, really do some cool things. And we're lucky to have him in this regard. But in terms of bringing on more people, even just to spotlight other people and make certain that we're doing the best things we can with Twitch, we need some folks who get it in a way that, like I said, but probably even looking at the amazing layout that I have today, in a better way than I get it. And so that's something that, you're absolutely right, we need to circle back around to. Got to keep going on questions. I am such a rambler. Any plans on supporting multiple types of character sheets in the same game? Not really. So this is something, and I actually answered this and on the suggestions forum the other day. We aren't looking to do that for the end. If you're doing a custom sheet or if you're doing a community contributed sheet, we'll be doing some of that when we do internal sheets. So an example, I think a really good example are the 2 sheets that we have coming out in Fog and Function that aren't the 5th edition Open Gaming License sheet. So the Dungeon World sheet, if you've ever played Dungeon World, the individual characters, classes have different sheets. And we've found a way to do that. And then the Gumshoe, similar to what we did with our World of Darkness license sheet, has a whole array of games that are functional within that. One of the reasons that we're kind of taking some more control of character sheets is that we've seen burnout from people in the community that are doing sheets in a way that we never intended. Our hope was that by allowing you to put community-generated sheets, it would allow more sheets to come in faster, which happened and was good. But the crummy thing is, in some of those bigger populations, is that people really held the poor volunteer accountable for updating the sheet every time that we did something. And that's not what we want. We're not trying to get a bunch of free work that people have got to then be beholden to. So we're going to try to do more with licensing and try to do more with sheets ourselves. And we're talking to several people right now about helping us maintain a bigger library of sheets. So that's something that we're after. Is there any easier grid tool that we can utilize the scroll wheel to match up grids, and have we considered adding a foreground layer? Grid tools are something that we definitely want to play with, as well as, I don't know if we'll do a foreground layer. I think the thing that we've talked about most internally is that we would like to add at least one custom layer that you could decide whether it's a second map layer, second token layer, second GM layer, and go from there, because we think that that's the best way to let you choose how to do it, but it's also resource light by not adding 10 different layers or something like that. I think definitely one of the challenges in a whole lot of the things, because those are at least the foreground layer thing, is something that's come up as a question with in the suggestions forum, is we need some more Canvas and WebGL experience, some time to work on those 2 coding languages and figure that out. Something that I think people don't always realize about Roll20 is its development. If you think about what Roll20 is, it's a browser-based software as a service, right? How many other browser-based tools do you use in your day-to-day life that do half the things that Roll20 does? We do some really crazy advanced stuff with what we allow you to do with integrating with the API, with WebRTC for voice and video interconnected between people, and then just with the layering and the ability to show images and share images between multiple people interacting simultaneously. There's a whole heck of a lot of like crazy bleeding edge, oh my gosh, how did you ever attempt this in a browser stuff that Roll20 does. And so when we get to the edge of things, we are really at the edge of things in an area where other people, where there's not simple documentation, there's not somebody else that we can look to and say, hey, how did you solve this problem? Because no one else is attempting the sorts of things we are. So there are some areas like that where we're stuck and we need some time to sit down and kind of mine in. So I hope that that's something that, the purpose of me coming out here to talk about this sort of thing is to help shed some light on that, so it's not just unknown why we don't push features in those sorts of ways quickly. All right. Possibility of personal compendiums instead of shared ones. Yeah, definitely something that we're trying to figure out exactly what all we're going to do with compendiums. And there is updates to the compendium in terms of functionality that you'll see with Fog and Function. So look forward to seeing what we've got there. As a content creator, I would love if Roll20 stream showed off a bit more marketplace creators' artwork. Is that a possibility? Yes. Obviously, I just showed off a little bit of Roll20 artwork. Adam, actually shows off a fair amount, and he's actually complained to us internally that right now a drawback of the way that we do our art library is that it doesn't make it easy to identify for somebody who has multiple purchases, and he's got access to the complete Roll20 marketplace for streams. It doesn't make it easy to cite where things are coming from. It doesn't make it easy to go, okay, this is Russ Hapke's stuff versus this is Devin Knight's stuff. And so while some of us know the differences, and some of those creators are big enough that you can eyeball and identify it, something that we need to do is kind of add back-end citations so it's easier for us to quickly link to things. But I mean, even as recently as the Tomb of Annihilation stream we did on the Dungeons and Dragons channel last Friday, afterwards we were tweeting out the jungle packs that were used and things like that. So it's something that we are aware of, concerned about, and want there to be more of, because we really do want marketplace creators to be able to share in the success of what's going on. So I love dynamic lighting. Is there any possibility for colored light sources? Yeah, that's. I mean, again, that goes into an area with canvas technology, and that's something that I think there's an interest in doing more of those sorts of things, but it's going to take us a while to get to a place where we're able to work on that. Why do inline rolls not function in rollable tables? I'm not certain what the setup is on that. I would assume it's because in part of the way that rollable tables are separated out from other elements of the interface. But as not somebody who's doing programming on staff, that's something I'd have to get an answer for you at another time. Any support for transmogrifying macros in the future? We would like to do a lot more with the transmogrifier and just the ability to move things between campaigns. And this is one of those elements where the way that we've set up macro permissions overall, I think, is something that needs to change. We found that out internally as we've done modules and things like that, that there are differences to what assigning. So 90% of what you do in the Roll20 interface, as far as if you're a subscriber, is assigned to the game master role. Macros were player assigned, and so there's been some issues there in terms of fine-graining it out. And yeah, there's changes that need to happen down the line. As for when we get to something like that, which is kind of a reoccurring theme you'll hear from me, is that outside of knowing that we're doing some stuff on the character data end with our next update after Fog and Function, and doing some stuff with marketplace usability. There are 100 different things that we would like to do, and it's a matter of figuring out what the priority, how we're going to prioritize them, and what we think is the best for the overall community. So something we'll keep an eye on and go from there. Is there any new cool merch coming in? Waited with bated breath for my shirt. So hopefully if you ordered a shirt, you should have it, or it is en route. All merchandise is out the door as best as I know from our warehouse. So please check if you have not gotten yet any format of tracking on that. We would like to hear about that, because you should have. But as far as what the next piece is, I've got a few questions out into the wind about various things that we might be able to get there. I'm hoping to get in at least one new winter piece. But as for precisely when that'll go live, I'm not certain. And I'll also say, in terms of doing physical merchandise overall, something that I definitely felt as we did this process. So we had decided everybody that we were using as a printer and had communicated with them our hopes timeline-wise. And then after we did that, we did a brief pre-order period where we didn't have the materials in hand, so we knew maximum amount that we could buy to get kind of ready and have the store regularly stocked after that. And everybody's estimates ended up being about 2.5 weeks worse than what they actually were when we turned back around with the maximum, like the response to the initial pre-orders. We hate that. Yeah, Roll20's motto forever has been kind of under promise and over deliver, and so I would say cool new merch is probably not something that will be teased. We'll probably wait until we're actually holding the thing and have it in our warehouse and are like, this is going. So yeah, that's lessons learned. But I mean, there's a ton of things we're looking. Even as simple as here's a prototyping possible drink holders. Like there's a ton of stuff out there that we would love to get to eventually. I think it's just a matter of making certain that that it's something that people actually want. So asking around quietly and making certain that it's not just something that we think is cool. But also, then making certain that we've actually got it in hand before we start trying to sell it. I will say that's one of the things that's crazy to me, just overall, that folks want Roll20 products. Super flattering that people are willing to walk around wearing Roll20 things. So thank you to everybody who's ordered that sort of stuff. Definitely appreciate it. So, what other questions? Let me run around a little bit and see if I've got any on Reddit, Google, or if there's anything. I would love to talk a little bit about the Pro Forums had a lot of questions about when we would be going and doing something new with the API or application programming interface. And I think one, that was our last update before this was Sheet Workers and a push with API to enable some things, and beyond that, similar to things I was talking about earlier in terms of Canvas and WebRTC, is that what we do with an API is really bleeding edge. That we essentially have this safe way for outside programmers to interact with the site and in a sandbox be able to do things. So it doesn't allow malicious use, and it does allow you to do some really, really cool things within our interface. But it's a advanced technology, and we've pushed a lot of it pretty far. Trying to figure out what the next slots are in that. There's two things that I'm aware of right now that we've are looking at and discussing. One is actually a separate API, an external API that could be used with Twitch to do some things to allow like showing off character sheets while people are streaming. And we've got some bigger streamers that are exploring that and playing with it. So hopefully something comes of that soon. And then the other thing that comes up, I think, most often and is really valid is that right now it's difficult if you've purchased something from the marketplace to get use of that with the API, to use the images that you've already gotten from us. And that's not cool. Like that's obviously not what we want for it to be difficult there. I think that, again, there's some licensing issues in terms of making certain that once we give use of that functionality, that it can't be abused to copy things with others. But it's definitely something that we've talked about wanting to find a change to in the future. So how can marketplace creators promote themselves best? It's a really good question. So first off, I think something to mention in terms of one of the reasons that we're doing this marketplace update, or after Fog and Function, that marketplace will be something that we're updating, is that we want to give you a little bit more control over how you're presented on the Roll20 marketplace. So in other words, you're going to have an author landing page that you've got some ability to work with us and change the layout of, so you can really show off the pieces that you want to show off and move your back catalog appropriately within that. Beyond that, I think I see people doing things with streamers and talking to them about getting the stuff featured, and I think that's a great method. But Twitter seems to be the epicenter of marketplace push. That there are some folks who are very successful with that, and a lot of that comes to being a good tweeter. Sharing, not only just talking about yourself, but sharing your peers. It really is a situation where overall they're not your competition, that a high tide raises all ships. But then beyond that, knowing the right times of day to post, the right content that's going to get retweeted and spotlighted and that sort of thing. So I would highly recommend Twitter as an element of that, and beyond that, just continue making good work and asking members of the community what they want to see. I think that's been one of the things that's really cool, is seeing the interaction between it. It's crazy to think when we launched Roll20 some 5.5 years ago, we had to really scrounge to find this sort of artwork, and now this artwork style of virtual tabletop stuff is so popular that there's been a half dozen virtual tabletops that have popped up having Kickstarters over the past few years, that they go and immediately the first thing they do is come to our marketplace and try to find creators. Imitation is a very sincere form of flattery in that regard. It's been really cool to see the marketplace explode, and for multiple creators to move past beer money into a more serious level. So the marketplace is something that I have been really passionate about since the very beginning of the platform, and I'm going to continue to try to find ways to help, because I think that marketplace creators end up being some of the biggest supporters of the platform and some of our best evangelists for talking about cool stuff that you can do in the platform. So yeah. Can we look forward to more advanced text and drawing tools and options? Sorry, I got a drink for half a second. I would say, again, that falls into a canvas area that, yeah, sure, absolutely, that's something that we're interested in working on down the line. But there's nothing approaching a public timeline on that. Customization overall is something that we're interested in. An example being like custom status markers for tokens and the like. We want to find more ways for you to be able to express what you want to express in the interface. Part of the balance on that, and going back 5 minutes or so to when I was talking about Twitch and us working with some big time streamers there so that they could use an external API to call down character sheets and the like. So Roll20 specifically has a kind of blank look to it. We're not a fantasy interface. It's not ingrained woods and rustic metals and those sorts of things. We try to stay very agnostic from a visual point of view. When we give over some of those broader control areas, so like a custom status thing, like text, like those areas, we are not all design experts. And I am, if I didn't have some very amazing design people around me, even as terrible as my overlay today looks, there's still elements of it which are on brand and put together because I've got some smart people helping me out. And that's the sort of thing is us finding the ways that as the interface is shown, it's attractive and allows you to bring yourself to it, but not to overwhelm it. And that's a really hard tightrope to walk, and something that we'll be continuously playing with over time. Is there any way that the looking for group can be improved upon? It feels like looking for fringe or niche games is extremely hard. Yeah, that's so looking, and this is one every time I talk about our looking for group tool, the first thing I say is that so when somebody cancels their Roll20 subscription, there's a small survey, and the number one reason somebody tells us that they quit using Roll20 and they quit subscribing to us is that their group fell apart. Not that we didn't have enough features, not that there wasn't enough value to what we were doing or anything like that. It's that their group fell apart. So we've got a really clear business financial incentive to be interested in there being better groups and more of them. And so what we've talked about internally for a long while now is trying to become kind of a Match.com of making groups. The thing is, that's going to be a really big undertaking, and it's not directly to the virtual tabletop. That's not something. When Richard Riley and I started this out in 2012, we came to it with each other. We knew who we wanted to play with, and when people started saying, "So how am I supposed to find people to play here?" It was like, "What do you mean? How are you supposed to find people to play here? Don't you have people to play with?" And that's changed so dramatically that people are. As a matter of fact, my own spouse was asking me last night about finding additional people for her game, so hitting at home with these issues. I think our hope is that we're going to, one, we try to keep the games that are directly listed in Looking for Group to games that there will at least be something there when you search it. So that's, if there's a smaller or an older game that's not in our Looking for Group engine and you ever wondered why, that's 90% of the time that's why, is that we're intentionally putting that under other games until we think that because we would never want you searching for a game and not being able to find something there and then not coming back and searching again. Yeah, it's an area that it absolutely needs improvement. We need more ways for you to communicate what sort of player or game master you are. We need to fine-grain things like there's been a lot of conversation about paid game mastering and the merits or demerits of that. We want people who are interested in it and think it's good to be able to interface with it, and people who don't want anything to do with it to be able to filter out. And we've put that filter in the Looking for Group system, but as long as we continue to have a Looking for Group forum, that's something that we're going to have to mess with as well. And I'll say, I think our goal internally would be that eventually we won't need a Looking for Group forum, that will have a tool that is robust enough that it covers edge cases and is usable in a way that's greater expanded. So that is Looking for Group is something we definitely care about. Right now, we are doing a little bit of work discussing what's going on with supergroups. So and that's the terminology we use for larger sections of the Roll20 community that are specifically trying to find games in an area. An example of that would be stuff like Pathfinder Society or the D&D Adventures League. But we have big groups that are foreign language groups and stuff like that. So there's an impetus there to help particularly those larger groups be able to find each other and to be able to use Looking for Group in different ways than what that system is currently geared towards. So yeah, Looking for Group is something that needs work, and again, it is the number one reason that anybody drops a Roll20 subscription is that their group falls apart. So it's very much within our interest to work on that aspect of things. But at the same time, one of the hardest things that we as a company can work on is like interpersonal agreement. So it's going to be something that takes time and a lot of testing to figure out. So I don't have a timeline on it, but yeah, it's important. Is there any chance on being able to use our own local files with the Roll20 jukebox? And are there any updates upcoming to the jukebox interface? So the last time we went and we did a major jukebox update was right when SoundCloud dropped their external API. We moved over to Fanburst and we went out and got a couple basic licensing deals to get some more music in place. Our hesitancy with doing custom upload is the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association, is like notoriously sue happy. They really make an effort to find people doing things with their music and stopping them. And so we've been hesitant to jump into that area. There are solutions that we've talked about every time that we go back and do a pass on the jukebox, but there's nothing yet that we've felt super comfortable with. And that's one of those things, I think this is the third time in the past 40 minutes that I've brought up, licensing and us trying to stay really clean here. And I'll say that's something that I think sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but at the same time, by being really careful about how we do things, it's allowed us to not have to waste time on lawsuits and other obnoxious things that would hold us up from actually being able to do development. There's plenty of things that we can work on without having to get into quagmires, particularly when we have the ability to sign agreements with folks and get a way to not only, you know, provide their content to you, but get everyone paid, which, you know, is amazing because it allows for the creation of more stuff down the line. But yeah, we are cautious in doing those areas, and that's, you know, that's exactly why the jukebox hasn't done that. Is it possible to do a Twitch viewer interaction, like a poll or something, that would generate random or not so random encounters where the DM could choose, a bit like Streets of Rogue game has done before? That's in the same realm of talking about doing some stuff with an external Twitch, with an external API for Roll20 integrating with Twitch. I think the first step for us is to do some stuff that shows off character sheets, and I don't know how far out that is. That's going to depend some upon the folks that we're working with on that. But it's not, you know, it's not completely impossible. It's just something that we're treading into carefully because, you know, again, it's a whole lot of messing with parts of the interface that we've kept more ownership of in the past. Is there any intention, any plans for support for isometric maps or anything other than a top-down display? So there are some people who already do isometric content on Roll20. I think it's just a matter of, is it what we're optimized for, and it not really. I'll even say this. I was having a conversation with Steve, our lead developer, this past week where we were talking about hex maps as it relates to dynamic lighting and to advanced fog of war. So with the grid in Roll20, with the flat grid, essentially the amount of processing that you need for those four sides, it can even be extended out because everything stays in a line. If you look at a hex in Roll20 is a very individualized object. There's the reason, like, if you look at the way hexes snap together, they either snap together vertical build or horizontal build. So there's a whole heck of a lot more lines, and they don't carry on in the same amount. And what that ends up meaning is a lot more math for the interface to do. And so, I mean, in the same reason that when you do dynamic lighting, all of our best practices material that's out there tells you to not use circles, because what that does is it makes for, you know, loads of points of processing. Instead, even on that map I was showing earlier, I had put some dynamic lighting down on one of the barrels. I did it like a cross. So one, you can see the barrel on all sides to some degree, but two, it's a lot less processing. And so, you know, when you're processing those things on the fly live for 5 different users, that can end up being a heck of a resource hog. And while that's not directly related to dynamic or to isometric maps, I think it's in the same sort of realm, trying to figure out what we need to do to do some of those more advanced elements of the interface. So no direct support that's, you know, immediately on the horizon, but we recognize that isometric maps are cool, and in the meantime, you know, encourage the folks who are doing wild things to fake it in the interface. Is there any intention to have some Roll20 official content, perhaps from the wonderful Adam Coble, pertaining to advice for running games and managing interpersonal relationships? Yes, we've done a little bit of that in the past. We've talked a little bit about doing some more of it. I think it's a matter of you know, time and adding. As I said earlier, I do think that we're looking for some more folks to help us out with Twitch content and YouTube content down the road. I think that that's also been something that's been helpful with dabbling a little bit in the esports stuff, is that we've gotten to have some more conversations with content producers there and editors. But I mean, and that's one of those things. I think overall staff is getting better and better at being able to produce videos. With Fog and Function launching this week, we've got a couple videos that really lay out what all the update has that Suzanne, the brand manager, put together, and they're super duper nice and like gorgeous and helpful. I think the challenge is that there's so many things that we have to keep up all the video documentation that we want to have. You know, the interface, you know, every time we do an update, that means that there are elements of the interface that are different. You know, if you were to think about it in terms of, we've got this major shift coming to the 5th edition Open Gaming License sheet this week. That means everything that we've ever done with video of that is now kind of out of date. So it's kind of an ongoing battle there. But to circle to the original question, advice for running games and managing interpersonal relationships. Adam already does some of that content with office hours, hot for teacher type stuff on his own channel, but that's definitely something that we've talked about getting done in the future. So it's on our list of hopes. Have we ever thought about doing an application to make Roll20 solely, or that instead of doing browser based? Yeah, we talked about it a lot early on, and we thought too many downsides, particularly when kind of a guiding star for us has been to be really easy to use and to plop you right in things. It's kind of antithetical to what we've been after the entire time. One of the reasons that we made Roll20 is that we didn't like some of the downloadable options that were out there. Because it was too hard to, not just download it and figure out port forwarding or whatever needed to be figured out with the application itself, but also and this is, going back a question, managing interpersonal relationships. When you're trying to get somebody to try out Dungeons and Dragons or whatever your favorite role-playing game is, it's a lot. There's rule books and all sorts of things that you feel like you got to know so that you get it right. And then adding on top of that, I got to download this program that I've never seen before, and I don't know what it. And I really think a huge part of Roll20's success is I send you a link, you're in it. You didn't have to download anything weird or creepy. You're just in the interface, and you're off to the races. So that is something that we think is fairly important. Are you going to do another Roll20 party at Gen Con 2018? This year's was an absolute blast. That was a really good party. I don't know what all of our convention plans are for next year. I do think as staff continues to grow, it's harder for us to get all of staff to Gen Con, and that's a conversation that we've had. But we like partying, and I think we'll continue to search for ways to do it. Do you think a module would ever be considered for the marketplace if it didn't have much artwork, or is artwork sort of a requirement? Artwork is definitely in the realm of a requirement. We want to have something that is instantly usable within the interface, and so I do think that it's been really a hallmark to try to have something visual to go along with what you're doing if you're making it into a module, because otherwise you basically have a PDF. And that has not been our main point of focus. I do think something that we've talked about is eventually trying to find a way to have like a base license for commercial use art set that folks who are not artistically inclined could use to make modules down the line. But as for what that would look like and when we would implement that, we're a ways off from that. API access for cards and decks as a question. Yeah, that's definitely something that we're interested in the same realm as being interested in having better functionality for all of your marketplace purchases with the API. It's just a matter of when we're able to circle back around for the API, and the API being a really fairly advanced technology that we've got some work to do to get to a point that we can really flex our muscles there further. Is there any intention to make Roll20 video content more immediately obvious on the website as someone arrives? So right now, it's in a couple places as drop-down. We've talked about doing like an embed somewhere on the site that just generally had our Twitch and YouTube content. I think that's a really good question. I think my preference would be that we continue to build up the content a little bit more. And have some more folks doing some more things in the video content area, and then figuring out showcasing inside the site. Because I think that those two things will naturally go hand in hand as they move forward. Any plans for updating editor functions, painting textures, better layer, object management? A lot of that relates back to Canvas and WebGL as programming languages, and it's the sort of thing that yes, absolutely we want. Our goal is to make a virtual tabletop that is super duper usable, and it's just a question of when we're able to go and do some more work there. Speaking of usability, any plans for the page toolbar? Folders, making it bigger, scrolling without holding shift key, etc. Page folders, better management. Page folders is definitely something we need. We need to change some of the way that some of those things operate. I think one of the balances that we've got to figure out is that people like to try to shove everything they can into one campaign. And that is not... Then what that means is that everybody who uses that campaign has to load in all of those things, which can make loading in a campaign a very arduous experience. And so we're trying to find ways to load in only partial things and to make it a different sort of usable down the road. So it's something that, again, we've talked about, but I don't have any timeline. We recognize that there's an issue there, and it's something to work on. So with less than 5 minutes to go and wanting to put a bow on this, I think, overall, one, definitely would like to do more of this sort of thing. I think it's really helpful to have a chance to sit down and talk some of these things aloud so that people aren't completely in the dark as to what we're working on and what our plans are. At the same time, though, I would say there's a degree to which, and I talked about this some on the professional, the Roll20 Pro forums, is that I think a challenge for us is that there's a lot going on that either isn't front facing. So in other words, as I said, we spent a lot of the summer onboarding new programmers and working on them being able to use our back end and function within that, and that's not something that's hey, here's a new person and they're going to be hiding in the background trying to figure out how to use the website. There's not a whole lot of value in terms of talking that out. I think it's something that we just kind of got to put our heads down and work on, and then outside of that, there are things that, just from a licensing perspective or from an order, what we're able to get done fast or with other stakeholders, that it's tough to talk about out loud. And that's definitely been a challenge of Roll20 growing. But at the same time, going all the way back to the Kickstarter, we have always kind of under promised and over delivered. And I really do think, in that same realm, I say to you, I do think that our best days are ahead, that we've got a whole lot of cool things that are being worked on. I just can't tell you about all of them. And I think, one of the things that we tried to do this year, as we had a whole bunch of, programming behind the scenes work, is that we tried to find other things to do. So like, adding physical merchandise, doing the esports advertising and those sorts of things. And I think we'll continue to find ways to do, there were a lot of questions today, and, where we are right now is on our Twitch channel. So it makes sense that we would have a lot of questions about Twitch channel and having more content. And I'm certain that if Suzanne, our brand manager, is watching, she's nodding her head furiously, because these are all things that we've been talking about throughout the year in terms of things that we're looking to add. So we've got a lot of big plans and a lot of things that we're working on and are really working pretty hard. So I'm really excited about, this year we basically doubled the amount of staff we have, and they have put in a whole lot of work, both the things that you're seeing with Fog and Function in terms of the additional Compendium functionality and the character sheet stuff that's on the way, but also just, Gen Con, in addition to throwing a really awesome party, got a whole lot of licensing work done, and sat down and talked with a whole bunch of people and made movement on a whole bunch of really cool things that people would love to hear about once we have things to show you for sale related to some of those ongoing contract elements. So it's been, I really do feel like 2017 overall has been something of a quieter year in terms of feature push, but at the same time, I recognize what the platform needs is for us to be able to, we cannot push features at every single month pace. We've got to take time to make certain that we're doing them in the right way with the right documentation that really works. So yeah, that's why sometimes we don't talk as much as we should. But at the same time, I don't see any reason why myself or other people on staff can't come out here and have some of these conversations with folks, so they've got an idea of at least that we are aware that there are things that need adding to and need to be better in the interface. And that's something too. Everyone on staff has their own personal pet peeves with the interface that they want worked on. Mine, that I got a half work on done this year, was the way that add-ons work in the interface. That I thought it was too complex to add add-ons in comparison to what it was starting off with a complete adventure module. And I think that we got, I'll give it like 70% of what I would like that process to look like working done. But I think there's more to be done there, and everybody on staff has those sorts of things. So, and we understand that everybody who uses the interface does as well, because we're all consumers too. But that's all I had to chat about today. Looking forward to doing this again. I got to run to another meeting, so that's a wrap. Thank you for coming out. Thanks for sitting around and listening to me ramble for an hour. That's super flattering as well. Take care, and look forward to Fog and Function dropping really, really, really soon.